For most of us, the name Sophie Scholl doesn't ring a bell, but here in Germany, everyone knows about this girl. German television voted her the most influential German that has ever lived, and the young generation of this nation voted her the most influential female person of the 20th century, and this even though she only lived to be 21 years old. So who was this Sophie Scholl? Well, if she would have lived today, she would probably answer that question by saying, I am a Christian. But Sophie was not just any Christian. She was a Christian committed to the fact that faith in Jesus Christ must have consequences in real life. Sophie Magdalene Scholl was born on May 9th, 1921 in Fortenbach, Germany, and was only 12 years old when the Nazis took over in her homeland. To indoctrinate the young generation as quickly and early as possible to do anything for their leader, almost every German child was recruited to Hitler Jugend, Hitler Youth. Sophie joined when she was 14. She got to march in uniform. She learned that she was such an important part of her nation and how her race was superior above all others. At first, it was exciting. The pride of being taken seriously, that the nation counted on her, that she could give her life for something big, something noble. But more and more, something started to feel wrong. Sophie had had a Christian upbringing from her father, and she was raised in the faith that everyone is equal. Everyone is created, precious, and the same before God. And gradually, during her teenage years, she realized that the view of Hitler was completely the opposite one. She was shocked when one of her friends, a Jewish girl, was denied her human rights. And when finally Germany invaded Poland in 1939, she finally realized that the party, the nation she was part of, was going completely the opposite way of the God she believed in. In May 1942, Sophie moved down to Munich to study here at Ludwig Maximilian University. She was 20 years old now, and she had seen so much hate, oppression, and cruelty, especially toward the Jewish people, that she knew she had to do something. How could she call herself a Christian, she asked herself, if she did not stand up for Jesus and for truth in the dark hour that her nation was facing? To stand up against Hitler would mean the death penalty. She knew that. But she decided to do whatever she could for as long as she would get to live. Sophie and her brother Hans moved into a small student apartment in the house right behind me. And here, history was written. The two siblings, together with two of the friends from the university, they formed what was called the White Rose, a resistant movement that, based on their faith in Jesus Christ, wanted to wake the German people up and encourage resistance against Hitler. They bought a typewriter, they bought a copying machine, and started to write letters of protest. These were then secretly sent out to people of influence all over Germany by the thousands. And these 5 letters sent from the White Rose are still legendary examples of civil resistance against an ungodly government.
Nothing is so unworthy of a civilized nation as to not speak out in protest while governed by an irresponsible group that follows their own unworthy instincts. Every word that comes from Hitler's mouth is a lie. When he says peace, he means war. When he uses the name of the Almighty, he means the power of evil, the fallen angel, Satan. His mouth is nothing but the smelly mouth of hell. Since the invasion of Poland, 300,000 Jews have been murdered in this nation in the most horrible way. This is one of the worst crimes against all humanity, one that is unprecedented in all of history. If the German people are already so spiritually damaged that they do not lift a hand against what is happening, if they have given up on man's supreme gift, the one that raises her above all of God's other creatures, our own free will, if they abandon their will to act and turn back the wheel of history, if they have already gone so far down the path of the cowardly mass, then they deserve their own destruction. But in all times of great trials, prophets and saints have stood up, men and women of God who cherished their freedom, who preached to one true God and stirred the people to action. Man is free, but without God, we are defenseless in the battle against evil. We are lost ships in the storm. We are infants without their mother, clouds that dissolve into thin air. If you're a Christian but hesitate and wait, hoping someone else would raise his arm in your defense, has not God given you strength? Has not God given you the will to fight? We must attack evil where it is strongest, and its greatest power is Hitler. Only faith can reawaken Europe. Only faith can give people back their rights and restore true Christianity on earth as the only guarantee of peace. We will never grow silent. We are your bad conscience. The white rose will not leave you in peace.
The letters of the White Rose spread like wildfire all over Germany during the summer, fall and winter of 1942. Gestapo, the German police, was convinced that they had come from a large national underground organization, and they worked like crazy to find and to stop it. No one even imagined that these letters that affected more and more people and helped them understand that the Nazi message was contrary to God and His Word came from a handful of Christian teenagers. Sophie and the other members of the White Rose knew well it was just a question of time until they were arrested and would be executed. But the time they had, they wanted to make the most out of. On February 18th, 1943, Sophie and Hans walked up and down the hallways of the university. And with them they carried bags with thousands of copies of their fifth letter written to encourage people to stand up against Hitler. Right before classes were over, they put bunches of this letter outside every single door so that all the students coming out from their classes would get a copy each. As the bell sounded and the classes were over, Sophie stood right here at one of the balconies in the great hall of the university, and she looked out on the thousands of students coming out of all the classrooms. She saw her own generation and realized that every single one of them now had a choice, either to keep following a diabolical leader further into darkness, or to turn back to God and build a society based on love, peace, and equality. Sophie's heart was stirred, and she grabbed hold of a bunch of that fifth letter and threw it over the balcony's edge. Surely she must have known when she saw the letters rain down over the students that she would be discovered and caught. But at that point, probably her own life and safety was the last thing on her mind. If only she could help the youth of Germany to wake up. Sophie, Hans and their friends in the White Rose were immediately arrested on the spot at the university. And the information that the White Rose, the resistant movement that has caused panic all over Nazi Germany, really only consisted of a few students in the university, it came all the way up to Adolf Hitler. The trial was a fast thing. They wanted to get rid of these young people as soon as possible. And only 3 days after their arrest, Sophie Scholl and her friends were executed by beheading and are buried here at the Munich cemetery. Sophie Scholl became 21 years old. And as a wonderful final chapter in the story of Sophie Scholl and the White Rose, it turned out that they had actually written a sixth leaflet that they never had time to copy or distribute. This leaflet was smuggled out through Scandinavia to England and got into the hands of the Allied forces. And to honor the courage, determination, and selflessness of a German Christian girl named Sophie Scholl, the Allies printed millions and millions of copies of her sixth letter, loaded the copies on bomber aircrafts, flew in over Germany, opened the hatches, and let Sophie's call to stand up for God and resist the evil rain down over all the nation. The letters she saw float down in the university auditorium now rained down for several months over her entire nation and her people. Today, the letters of Sophie Scholl and the White Rose that rained down over Germany are still embedded in the streets of Munich, commemorating a young Christian girl whose faith was turned into action and who lived her entire short life according to her motto, "I will stand for truth, even if I stand alone."